Well, hello Internet, and welcome to my AngularJS tutorial. This is the most popular request from you guys, and in this tutorial, after talking to a whole bunch of different people, I figured out that the main problem people have with AngularJS is all of the new jargon. So in this tutorial, I'm going to explain exactly what MVC means, or Model View Controller. I'm also going to cover modules, directives, scope, expressions, and services, and I'm going to do all this by using a ton of examples. So I have a lot to do, so let's get into it. Now, AngularJS is going to provide a front-end framework based on the MVC model, or Model View Controller, and it is built on top of JavaScript as well as jQuery. And with MVC, the model is going to represent the data source, the view is going to be the rendered web page, and the controller is going to handle communication between both of them. And by structuring your page this way, your code is going to be easier to maintain, it's also going to be easier to update, and it's also going to make your code much more readable. And that brings us to AngularJS's jargon, which I'm going to explain in this tutorial, but briefly I'm just going to cover everything that you see right here. AngularJS uses modules which are going to represent the components used in your application. And by using modules, it's going to make it much more easy to reuse your code in other applications or other parts of your site. Now, web pages are normally going to be manipulated by working with the DOM object in either JavaScript and jQuery, and AngularJS is going to allow you to extend HTML tags and attributes using something called directives, which are going to make it very easy to bind data directly to your HTML elements. Now, AngularJS is going to use JavaScript objects to represent said data called the scope, which can be data generated on the web server, or a database, or a web service, or client-side using regular AngularJS code, which I'm going to provide a bunch of examples of that in this tutorial. You're also going to be able to use expressions that are directly linked to the scope or data. Anytime you see scope, just think data. And the benefit to this is that the page is going to be updated dynamically as the data changes. Data binding, which is sort of another jargon term, works as well so that whenever your data changes on your web page, the model is going to be updated, as well as whenever data changes on the model, your web page is going to be updated. And then finally, that brings us to services. There are many services provided for common tasks like Ajax techniques to dynamically pull data from web services and other such things, which I'm going to demonstrate in this tutorial. So enough talking, let's jump over and start writing some code. Okay, so on the left side of the screen, I have the Atom text editor, which I'm going to use in this tutorial instead of Sublime Text, which I normally use. And on the right side, I have Google Chrome. And you can see the beginning of a web page here. And of course, all the code's available in the description for free. And I named the HTML file angulartut.html. And then I'm going to have a JS file called exam1.js. And everything's structured so that you can see it right here. Basically, the HTML is going to be in a folder called AngularTut, and then I'm going to have a JS folder inside of there that's going to have all my JavaScript files. So make sure you have everything structured exactly the same way. And we're going to create our web pages just like we normally would with our HTML tags and so forth, and body and all this other stuff. And if you want to be able to import AngularJS, this is a CDN, and this is all you basically have to do is put this at the end of your file, near the end of the body tag, and then provide a link to your script, your JavaScript code that you're going to be using inside of this HTML page. And basically what we're going to be doing here is implementing a template, model, controller, as well as scope. And I'm going to jump over into the exam1 or example1.js file right now. I'm going to type in var app1 is equal to Angular module, and then what we're going to do is pass in app1 inside of this, and then followed by brackets. And then what I'm doing here is I'm going to define the AngularJS model that I'm defining. And modules are basically used to associate an AngularJS app with the part of an HTML document. They're also going to provide access to numerous AngularJS features and also help with organization. And the Angular module function here is going to accept the module name as well as a list of modules inside of this bracket. We don't have any inside of here right now, but it's normally going to list a bunch of modules that we're going to need for this to be able to function properly, as well as an optional configuration for our module, which would come after this, after another comma, but we're not going to use that either right now. Now you may be wondering, where exactly is this app1 coming from? I'm going to jump over here, and right after the HTML, I'm going to type in ng-app is equal to app1. And this is going to define the ng-app parameter, and it's normally going to be either put in the HTML tag right here or in the body. And this is going to be set so that AngularJS knows where to begin compiling your code. And app1, like I said previously, is going to be the module name, and as we saw previously, it's going to be referenced in our JavaScript file. Another guy we can put inside of here that we're going to use is ng-init, and it is what we call a directive, and what it's going to do is initialize application data by assigning different values to variables. So we could do something like come in here and say person is equal to first name, and we could put Derek inside of there, and last name, and put my last name inside of there. And then we could put a semicolon, and then we could put in another group of data. Say we have something like capitals is equal to, and we could say city, Montgomery, and state. We'll be using this data here in a second, and then throw some additional state capital information inside of there. And while we're inside of here, we might as well define our controller. So we're going to say div, and to define the controller, we just go ng-controller is equal to, and let's just call this controller1, and then close off our div tag. And basically what we're saying here is this right here, this div element is going to be a view, as well as all the other elements that lie inside of it. And we're going to use our scope component to provide data to our view. So let's jump back over into JavaScript again and define our controller. And to do that, we just go app1 and controller. We're going to reference the controller's name that we defined over in the HTML, just like this. And then we'll throw a function inside of here. And like I said previously, the scope is going to link our HTML elements to variables in our scope. And the controller function in this situation is going to receive the controller name as well as a factory function. That's what this is referred to as, a factory function. Let's close that off right there. And the factory function is going to get the controller ready to use, and we're saying scope right here is a dependency by putting it inside of the attributes area, and that is telling Angular to automatically pass in the scope object whenever the function is going to be called. Angular's smart enough to know what we want, and it's going to throw it in there automatically for us. And this is an example of what we call dependency injection. Angular basically sees that my factory function contains a scope component, and it goes and gets it and throws it into the function to be able to use for whatever we need automatically. And we can start assigning values inside of here just by going scope, and first, for example, is equal to 1, which is going to define an initial value for us. And then let's come in here and create another one, and let's call this second, give it an initial value of 1. And then let's also come in and define a function that's going to be called whenever a button's clicked. Basically what I'm going to do here is I'm going to have it sum data and automatically update everything on the screen. So you can create a function inside of here, inside of the scope object, and let's call this update value. And how you would do that is go function, and it's not going to receive any attributes. We can leave that blank, close that off though. And then we're going to say scope calculation is equal to the value assigned to the first element, which we're going to define here in a second. And we're basically creating a string here that we're going to then output onto the screen. And second, go down to the next line, is equal to, and then we can go and add the two values together. And I'm going to use a shortcut here, which is the unary plus operator, which is going to convert a string into an integer in this situation. So I can get my scope like this, and then add it to the other value that I have defined in the HTML, and we'll output that to the screen. So we'll save that, and we'll jump back over into our HTML, and we'll start defining some things. So let's say we want to throw a span inside of here, and we could just say values. And now we're going to define two elements that are going to be bound to the first and second values in the scope that we defined previously. And we're going to bind them using the ng model. So we'll say input type is equal to text, and then we'll bind them to those scope values by saying ng model first. Put these inside of quotes though. You're going to see that they automatically update. And then we're going to do exactly the same thing for another value here. So we'll say this is second, of course, because that's how we defined it previously. And we also said that we want to bind a click event to call our update value, this function right here. And in this situation, we're going to use a button. So we can say ng-click is equal to update value, and that's a function. And we'll just put sum as the value for our button. throw a couple break statements in here. And then if we want to get this value right here, the calculation, what we're going to do is we're going to be able to display that scope value inside of this using what's called an expression. Just a couple curly brackets and then calculation, and that'll automatically display right there. And if we reload it, you can see right here, values 1 and 1, those default values 1 and 1 come from this definition right here. And we can come in here and change those values and hit sum, and you can see the calculations automatically generated. So you can see just how easy it is to come in here and change all those different values and work with them. And you saw an example basically of a whole bunch of different things, directives and models, and how we're going to be able to update all those different values. Now in regards to expressions, you're also going to be able to perform calculations with expressions. So we could come in and just go do something really simple. 5 plus 5 is equal to expression, and then just put 5 plus 5 inside of there and reload, and you can see 5 plus 5 is equal to 10 automatically goes inside of there. And your expressions are going to be able to also bind data directly to the HTML, so we're not going to have to use ng-model with an expression. So you could say your first value is, and then just come in here and then just type in first, and it's automatically going to update even when those values change. So your first value is 1. Let's come up here and change it to 2. Oh, you see that changed? 5, see? They're both changing automatically. There you go. Pretty cool. And you're also going to be able to bind these using another directive called data ng-bind. So we could say your second value is, and then we could throw a span inside of here, and then inside of it go data ng-bind is equal to second. So we can refer to it in a couple different ways, and then close that span off and close off the paragraph. Your first value is 1, your second value is 1. We can also come in, change that to 6, and so forth and so on. So there's a bunch of different ways to bind data directly into your elements. You're also going to be able to build strings using expressions. So you can come in and say person fname plus person last name. You entered, and then we could say first and second, and the person that I'm referring to here is this information that we put in here inside of ng-init. Reload that. Derek Banish, you entered 1 and 1. See how that shows up? So there's a lot of freedom in regards to how you can work with data. Another thing that's kind of neat is we could use ng-repeat to cycle through a list of information. So let's take our capital information here and cycle through it. To do so, we could just go ul for an unordered list, and li, and then call ng-repeat is equal to, and we could say capital in capitals. See, this is called capitals, and then just output the information that we want inside of an expression. So we could say city, and then capital city plus, and state plus, and capital state. And then of course close off our list item and close off our unordered list and reload it, and you can see that it automatically went out and printed all that information directly inside of there. So that's a quick overview of a whole bunch of different things you can do with AngularJS. Now I'm going to jump over and show how we can use multiple views as well as multiple controllers. Okay, so I created a new HTML file to AngularTut2.html and exam2.js, and you can see right here we have app2, and if we jump over here, I already defined app2 in there, and I don't have ng-init in there right now. Now, if you'd like to create multiple different views using the same controller, this is how we would do it. So let's go and throw an h4 tag in here, and we'll just go entry controller, and I'm going to have this generate some random numbers inside of here. So I'm going to call this control1, close that off, and we could do first random number, and we could throw an expression inside of here, which is going to be random num1, and then throw an h4 tag inside of there, close that off. And let's do the same thing. Let's generate 2 of these. As I said, I want to generate 2 views for one controller. So the controller is going to be exactly the same, except in this situation, I'm going to call this second, and then I'm going to have random number 2 inside of here. Now let's jump over into our JS file, and inside of this controller, I'm going to define both of those. Once again, we're going to say scope and random number 1 is equal to, let's generate a random number using JavaScript. So we'll say math floor, and then we'll say math random times 10 plus 1. So 1 through 10 is what we're going to be generating here. And then we'll do the same thing for random number 2, and we'll see how they generate different numbers randomly. And that's all we need to do. We can reload this. You can see first random number is 10, second random number is 7, 8 and 10, 6 and 3, and so forth and so on. And in this situation, we have one controller and two views. Now let's take a look at how we can use multiple different controllers. So let's jump over into the JavaScript first, and we'll define a new controller. I'm going to do it in much the same way, and this is going to be a weird mood generator. And I'm just going to leave this be app2 controller once again, except this is going to be our bad mood generator. And I'm just going to create an array of bad feelings. There we go, disregarded, unimportant, rejected, and powerless. And now let's go and randomly generate different bad moods. And we're going to generate good moods here. So we're going to go bad feelings and math floor, math random times 4. So this controller here is going to generate some bad feelings, and we're also going to create another one that's going to generate some good feelings. And there we go. So we have the good and the bad and two separate controllers. Now let's jump over into the HTML, and you can pause this for a second if you want to type it out. Then I'm going to jump over into the HTML and make these work. And to do so, I'm just going to create some h4 tags again. ng-controller is equal to, and I'll reference my bad controller, and then I can say feeling, and then I could go bad, h4, and then we're going to do the same thing with our good controller. There's good, and then I'll just change this to good and save it and reload it, and you can see that it automatically generated I'm feeling powerless, I'm feeling inner peace, I'm feeling disregarded, I'm feeling pleasure, and so forth and so on. So there are examples of how we can create multiple views that use the same controller, as well as a page that contains multiple controllers. Another thing to pay attention to here is when I reload this, you can see for a brief second, I think you can see it anyway, you can see the curly brackets in there. Well, in the next part, I'm going to show you how to get rid of that, as well as a whole bunch of different directives. Okay, so if we want to get rid of those curly brackets showing up there momentarily, what we're going to do is type in ng-cloak. And if you had your reference to AngularJS near the top, like in the head section, you wouldn't have to do this, but if you have it at the bottom, you're going to have to come in here to the style section, and you're going to have to type in exactly what we have here, which is basically saying that we don't want things to be displayed on the screen until everything has been properly compiled and ready to be displayed. Okay, so that's how ng-cloak works. You just slap it in there and everything works beautifully. Now I'm going to jump over into my JS file, and I'm going to throw some data inside of this controller here for us to be able to use. So I'm going to say scope and groceries is equal to, and let's create an array of different objects we have here. So I'm going to say item, tomatoes, and this is going to be sort of like a grocery list. So purchased, was it purchased yet or not? I'm going to put false inside of there. I'm going to do this for a bunch of different food items, and then I'm going to show you different ways to manipulate them over in the HTML part. Hummus. Okay, so there's some different things we want to get if we go to the grocery store, and let's keep it like that for now and jump over into the HTML and work with that. And you can see here I'm referencing that controller that I have over there, glist control, grocery list control. And like I showed you previously, you're going to be able to bind data using either expressions or ng-bind. For the most part, I like to use expressions though, because they're just easier, but you can go either way. Well, let's say we want to give this a class name of list title, and we wanted to get the number of items in our grocery list. We could just say groceries and length, and this will make for a nice title, groceries to get, and then close that off. I might as well demonstrate how to use ng-bind here as well. h3 class equal to list title, do exactly the same thing, and then we could throw a span inside of here. ng-bind is equal to groceries length, quotes around it, and then close off that span, and then type in groceries to get, and close off the h3 tag. And you see if we do that, you get exactly the same results, just in two different ways. Let's get rid of this though so it doesn't cause confusion. You're also going to be able to list those array items that we have inside of there. Let's go and do something here. We'll say OL, because I want to show you a couple different neat things here. And I know you're not supposed to put styling inside here. I'm just doing this just as a quick and dirty way to get around things. 15 pixels. So we're going to create an ordered list and a list item, and I'm going to use an expression here to go and get one of my grocery items. So I'm going to say groceries, and I'm going to get the first item since it's zero-based array, and I want specifically just the item name in this situation, and list item, close that off, and close off that ordered list, and return, and you can see tomatoes shows up there, and of course tomatoes is the first item that I defined inside of there, so that's how we get individual array items. And now what I'm going to do is use ng-repeat like I used previously to list the rest of the items. So I'm going to use an ordered list again, and if I want to skip the very first item, I can say start is equal to 2. So I'll skip the first item so that we'll have tomatoes and all the other ones directly underneath there. And now for each of the list items, I can use ng-repeat to cycle through all of them and list them out. And I can say grocery in groceries. I could also skip showing tomatoes here in this situation since I don't want to list it twice by going ng-if, and then I could use index to make sure that my index is greater than 0, right like that. And that's going to skip the very first index or the 0 index and then list the rest of them. So there's another guy you can use, ng-if, as well as index. And ng-repeat actually has a whole bunch of different guys like index. As you're cycling through all of these different items, you're also going to be able to use first. And this value is going to come back true if the item that we're currently working with is the first item. You're also going to have last, and that's going to come back true if the item you're currently working with is the last item. I'm going to demonstrate this. Middle, if it is neither the first or the last, it's going to come back as true. And you're also going to be able to use even as well as odd. And in those situations, or in this situation, if the item is a even index, it's going to come back true. If it's an odd index, it's going to come back false. So let's cycle through these and take a look at what we got. So we can say grocery and item is what we want to list out here. And I'll also list out index. You could also do the odds and all those other different guys that I just showed you a second ago. And li and reload. And you can see that potatoes, bread, hummus comes back, and you also can see that I have the index right there. And there's a whole bunch of different really cool things we can do with all those different guys, as we'll see as this tutorial continues. You're also going to be able to use either ng-repeat start or ng-repeat end to allow yourself to be able to use ng-repeat on 2 elements rather than just using 1 element. And how you would structure those in this situation, I'm going to create a table. So we'll go table, and we'll go tr, and I can say ng-repeat start is equal to grocery in groceries, and then we'll go td, use an expression here, grocery, item, close that off, and then I'll go tr, ng-repeat end, and then in this situation, I'm going to list out whether the item has been purchased or not, and then close off that tag as well. If we reload it, you're going to see they all list out there. Tomatoes false, potatoes false, da 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 da. So pretty cool. Different ways we can cycle through different information using AngularJS. And I think that data binding is kind of cool, so I'm going to use another example here where I'm going to show you how you can use what's called two-way binding to allow your users to come in and change the data model. So let's say we have a label here. I'll have it just be change first item, and then we'll provide an input and use ng-model again to bind that over there with the first grocery item. So that would be groceries, 0 like this, and then reference item specifically, and make sure this is inside of quotes, and then we'll close off that input box. See, we're not doing anything with the JavaScript. It's going to automatically work. So reload this, and see right there, it comes back as tomatoes. Let's change this to ketchup. And you can see as I type it in, it's automatically changing. And you can do anything you want with it. So pretty cool stuff. Another thing that's really neat is we can use something called ng-include, and that's going to allow us to input HTML fragments directly into our pages. And I just want to point out that before we do this, if you get an error that is called cross-origin requests are only supported for protocol schemes, the reason why is you need to have all of this inside of a server to be able to have this work, and you can refer to my XAMPP tutorial, XAMPP, if you want an easy way to install a Apache server on your computer. But that's what that error means if you see it. So what I want to do here is create a grocery list HTML file as well as another grocery list, and one of them is going to be an ordered list and one's going to be an unordered list. So let's get our unordered list handled here first off. So you're going to be able to use all of your AngularJS techniques outside of here and pull them directly inside and have them automatically work, which is pretty cool. So we're going to do ng-repeat again, grocery in groceries, and then we can use our expression grocery item, close that off, close our unordered list, and we'll select all that, copy it. I'm going to do pretty much the same thing in the grocery list part, except this is going to be an ordered list. So I'll change that to ordered list, change that to ordered list, and and let everything else be exactly the same. We can close those. Well, let's reopen it just so you can see what I actually had the names for these. Okay, so I don't think I showed it. This is called grocerylist.html, and this is called ulgrocerylist.html. Again, all the files are available in the description, and those are saved in the same directory as all of our other HTML files, as you can see right there. Now I'm going to jump over into the JavaScript file, and this is basically going to return different HTML partials based on whether a checkbox is going to be either checked or not checked. So I'm going to say scope get list is equal to function, and then close that off at the end. And this is going to return scope show list, and if show list comes back as true, it's going to return the unordered grocery list HTML file to display inside of there. Otherwise, it's going to return the regular grocery list.html file and show that or display it inside of there. Jump back over here and use it. So let's define an h3 tag inside of here, and we'll say grocery list, close that off, and then we'll go and create a div and call ng-include. That's going to allow us to use a partial inside of here, and by default I'm going to use grocery list.html. Make sure you put the double quotes with the single quotes inside of there for this to work, and then close off that div. And now I'll show you how to get this to work with the checkbox. So we'll say type, and this is going to be a checkbox, and then I'm going to use ng-model equal to show list. Remember, this is the thing that we were checking. If it's true, it's going to see there's show list. If it's true, it's going to return unordered list. If it's false, it's going to return grocery list. So two different partials depending upon whatever this checkbox is checked or not. Close that off, and then we could say show unordered list, and let's throw a label around this as well, and then close off our label right here. And now what we can do is call ng-include as an element itself, and have the source be equal to a call to the get list function. And if we go and reload it, you can see grocery list, and it automatically went and printed all those out. And that's what happens whenever you just do a regular old ng-include and give it a very specific file name. It's going to put that HTML partial inside of there. And here you can see that we can change the partial just by checking on this little checkbox. See how they switch back and forth? So that's how we can use an event of sorts to automatically change the HTML partial that shows up inside of there. So another cool trick. Another thing we can do that's cool is we're going to be able to use something called ng-switch, which is going to allow us to conditionally insert or remove an element inside of our document. So let's just go and create a label again, and we'll go type a number, and we'll say 1, 2, 4 is what we're specifically looking for here. And then we'll use an input box, text box in this situation, ng-model, and we want to bind it to some number, and we'll close off that label. And now we'll use ng-switch to go in and say div ng-switch is equal to, and here is where some number is going to be. Close off that div, and then we'll load completely different elements depending upon what that was. And we'll say ng-switch win is what we'll be using here. So if they put a 1 inside of there, we're going to put you entered 1. Close that off, and let's do a whole bunch of these. You can put anything inside here, not just text. You could put whole entire elements, or you could use ng-include, put a whole bunch of things inside of there. Just change this to 2, 3, 4, and then let's also create a default, and the default is just going to be ng-switch default, like this. And in this situation, we'll just say something like not following directions, and reload that. Type a number from 1 to 4, type in 1, so you entered 1 comes in there, type in 4, 4 comes in there, type in 7, not following directions goes in there. You can see it's all automatic, which is very cool. So there's a whole bunch of neat ways that we can work with data binding and a whole bunch of other different directives. Now I'm going to go over and talk about events, as well as how we can enable or disable elements, as well as hide or show elements. Okay, so I'm going to be doing a little bit more styling here inside of here. So I'm going to paste this inside of here. Again, this is called app4, and this is exam4.js and angular4.html. And you'll see how I'm going to be using all those additional little stylings that you see right there here in a moment. Again, got a controller, we have a module reference and so forth. So let's come in here and play around with all this stuff. Let's close off this div first off so that doesn't cause any confusion. We're inside of our controller, and it's called event controller in this situation. I'm going to focus in here on all the different events we can use. So I'm going to create an input box here just to keep this very simple. And to start off, I'm going to say that I want to target the ng blur event, which would occur anytime the user would go inside of an input box and then leave. Whenever that occurs, I'm going to say here that I want to take the value for ng-blur and increment it by 1, and then we'll close that off. And then underneath of it, I'm going to throw an h4 tag inside of here, and I'm going to say that I want to display on the screen an incrementing blur event. So I'm going to say blur, put blur inside of there, and then close off that h4 tag, save that, and then jump over into the JS file over here, and inside of the scope object, I'm going to give blur a default value of 0 and save that. Jump back over here, save all that stuff and reload. Whoop, change this to AngularTut4.html. And you can see there's the input box. I clicked inside of it, I left, that incremented. Clicked again, it incremented. Click again, it incremented. And you can add a ton. I'm actually going to add every event to just this input box just to demonstrate all of them. So there you go. I added in click, double click, copy, paste, cut, focus, model, change, key down, mouse enter, and mouse leave. And you can see all those other different events, and they're structured exactly the same way that blur was, except key down is going to be different, so I'm going to have to change my JS file for that. Let's jump over into my JS file now. And you can see there I went and changed all of those different things, gave them all the default value of 0. One guy that's a little bit different, however, is the key down whenever they click on the keyboard. Let's check over here. Did I define that? Yes, key down event like this. Basically what happens is whenever they press something or a number or whatever or a key on the keyboard, it's going to pass over an event to my JavaScript file, and I need to handle it properly over here to display what key was specifically clicked on. And to do that, I'm just going to go in and say scope key down, which is what I want to display on the screen. But to make that work, I'm going to go function E, the event that we had over here. See, this event is going to be passed over as the variable E in this situation. And this is a little bit funky, but this is basically going to convert the key code that's passed over into basic characters and numbers so we can display. I'm just looking for an example to show you here. And to convert from a key code to an actual character, we could use from character code e.keycode. This isn't perfect, like I said, but whatever, it's going to work for what we're doing here. And the other guys that we have here is mouse enter and mouse leave. Don't need to do anything special for those guys, so we can just come down here and create another scope. Mouse enter is equal to, and just give it a default value of 0. Do the same thing for mouse leave, default value of 0. And if we save that and we save this, everything should work. So let's reload it. And you can see right here, click event, watch that. I'm going to click on it. Up, see it work. Double click, watch this guy down here. Double click, up, see it showed up, and that also worked. I'm also going to be able to come in here and we could watch like the change events. See, there's nothing down there right now, so we could type in, you know, just something and change events. See, it changed 7 times. We typed in 7 different things. We could do a copy, watch this guy, copy. We could do a paste, watch this guy, paste. And there's also cut, and there's also focus, which is done whenever we actually focus on something. Forgot to put in my little key events, so this is over in the HTML file once again. So let's go H4, and we'll say key pressed, and throw in KD key, close that H4 tag, and then we'll do a similar thing for mouse enter event. There's also going to be mouse down, mouse move, mouse over, and mouse up, if you want to play with all those different guys. But I'm going to say mouse enter events, and then we'll do mouse leave events. And we define those over in the JS file. Yep, mouse enter, mouse leave. Those all look good. Mouse enter, mouse leave. And reload it. And you're going to see key pressed. I can come up here and click inside of there and hit G, for example. And it didn't show. Let's go and see why. And the reason why that didn't work is I had KD key with a lowercase k. Let's change that to KD key like that and reload it. And if I come in here to this guy and hit G and key pressed, you can see G shows up. And if I come in and hit 1, you can see that key pressed 1 shows up. And you can also see that the mouse enter and mouse leave guys are also working. So that's a rundown of all the different events we can use. Now I'm going to show you how you can enable as well as disable different elements. I'm going to clean up all the code here a little bit so we don't need to display all that at once. And I'm going to create a new scope variable, and it's going to be called disable button. And I'm going to give it a default value of true just to start off. And I'm going to jump back over inside of here in the HTML section, and I'm going to create a paragraph, And then inside of this, I'm going to create a button and say ng disabled, and it's going to be either be disabled or enabled based off of the value of disable button, which I defined over in the JavaScript file. So come in here, define disable button, and let's just give it a name of button, just to be a little boring. And there's my button. Now how I'm going to enable it or disable it is I'm going to have a checkbox. So we'll say input, and we'll have the type, of course, be checkbox. And here we're going to tie this by using ng-model once again to disable button. So the value is going to change depending upon whether this is checked or not for disable button. Close off our button tag and wrap that nice and save it and reload it. You can see right there, disable button, it's currently disabled. If I click on that, now it's enabled. So that's how we're able to go in there and very easily enable and disable different components inside of our web page. Now I want to show you how we can come in here and either hide or show different elements. So here we're going to show different things depending upon whether it's day or night. So I'm going to say scope daytime button is equal to true. And also I'm going to do something with table. So I'm going to create another one of these guys, and it's going to be, let's just do the capitals again. Create an array inside of here. And there we go. We can use that to demonstrate some other stuff with tables inside of here. So inside of our controller, of course, we're going to create another paragraph, and we'll throw an input box inside of here. And let's use a checkbox once again. Does that work good before? So checkbox, tie this to the model of daytime button and give it a value of morning. And then of course we close our paragraph tag, and then let's create two different paragraphs that we are going to display depending upon whether the checkbox is checked or not. And we're going to use ng-hide in this situation, and whether it's going to be hidden or not is going to be depending upon whether the checkbox is checked or not. If you want to do the opposite, so that if daytime button is checked, we want it, and it gives us a value of true, and we want to convert it into false, we just put an exclamation mark in front of it. So we'll say daytime button right there, and that'll turn trues into falses. And in that situation, we want good morning to show up, and otherwise, paste that inside of there. Let's get rid of this. And here we're going to say good evening. So it's going to show totally different information depending upon whether this is checked or not. Reload, and you can see good evening shows up there. If I click on good morning, it's going to say good morning, and so forth and so on. And what we're doing is completely changing or hiding and showing different elements depending upon a condition. We're also going to be able to come in here and change a class dynamically. So let's create another paragraph tag. This is where we're going to be using all that styling that we saw previously. So we'll go create a select guy in here. We'll say ng-model is equal to text styling, and we're going to have different options in this select box. We're going to change the class of an element using a select box. So we'll say blue text, and then we'll have our other option be bold text, and these guys are coming from this guy. Say this is blue text and this is bold text. So if you're wondering what those guys were, well, now you know. We'll just change this to bold text, and then we'll close off our select box and our paragraph box, of course. And then after this, let's create another paragraph, and this is going to be the guy we're going to be changing. And we'll define this as ng-class is going to be equal to whatever the value of text styling is going to be equal to. And we'll just make this some random text, blue text and bold text like that, and reload it. Blue text, see it's blue, bold text, now it's bold. Okay, so whatever you give the value for text styling here in this select box, or how you would change the model in any way, you would automatically be able to reference it in an ng-class item, and it would automatically transport the ng-class directly inside of there. So that's how we can dynamically change a class. And the final thing I'm going to show you is how we can bind classes on even as well as odd elements. So let's use ng-repeat here once again to cycle through our capitals that we defined over here inside of our JS file. Once again, inside of the controller, I'm going to create a table and table tr, and here I'm going to use ng-repeat like we have used previously. And here I'm going to say item in capitals, which is the name of our array. But I'm also going to define different classes that I want to use depending upon whether it's an even or an odd row. So we'll type in ng-class even is going to be equal to striped blue, which is a class that we defined above. And then for the other one, we're going to say ng-class odd is going to be equal to, and make sure you put that as single quotes inside of there, striped beige. And then for each of these individual items, we go td and get the item city as well as the item state and display those inside of that table with the different styling for each one of those. And then we'll close off tr and save it and reload. And there you can see they show up real nice and neat. So there you go, guys. That is a lot of information about AngularJS. In the next part of the tutorial, I'm going to continue teaching everything until I've taught pretty much everything you could ever want to know about AngularJS. And before I leave, I just wanted to send out a special thank you, like always, to all my Patreon supporters. You guys make it possible for me to continue making my videos, and thanks a bunch. And like always, please leave your questions and comments below. Otherwise, till next time.